Hello and welcome to the program. I am Deji. Now, Senate President Bukola Saraki has been cleared of all the false asset declaration charges leveled against him. The Supreme Court of Nigeria has dismissed the remaining 3 charges against the Senate President. The 3 charges are part of the 18 charges of false assets declaration filed against the Senate President at the Code of Conduct Tribunal in 2015. Saraki was initially acquitted of those charges in June 2017, but the Court of Appeal ordered a retrial after an appeal by the Nigerian government. The court, however, struck 15 charges and asked for a retrial on just 3 counts. Obviously not pleased with the ruling, Saraki approached the Supreme Court to dismiss all charges, and the 3-year-long prolonged case now has finally come to an end. The Supreme Court, in its verdict, said the Court of Appeal panel engaged in, quote, forensic somersault when it held that Saraki should answer to 3 of the charges. Saraki, in his reaction to the ruling, praised the Supreme Court judges for the declaration, insisting that it has shown that Nigerians can have faith in the judiciary. Joining me now to discuss the impact of this decision is a lawyer and, of course, the second vice president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Onyekachi Ubani. Mr. Ubani, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Yeah, thank you, Deji. How are you today?
Very fine, thank you. Tell me just how significant you think this verdict is coming from the Supreme Court.
Oh, well, very significant indeed. Yeah. Something that in the legal circles it will be debated upon and talked of for a very long time to come. Well, it's victory for Bukola Saraki and his supporters. Now, what does this speak? It speaks about the issue of diligence in issue of investigation, that in issue of criminal prosecution, it is proved beyond reasonable doubt. The moment there is doubt raised in the mind of the judge, the courts are, actually geared towards ensuring that that person that is innocent is actually cleared. That innocent in the sense that you have not succeeded in proving all the necessary evidence that will convict that individual. So issue of prosecution and putting your investigation in order is very, very important. And so to me, it's something that will be debated upon for a long time to come.
So in your own reading of this case, you think the prosecution had not done a good job?
So what it means is that, of course, the court was mentioning issue of hearsay, that you cannot in any way convict an individual in the country today with hearsay evidence. You have to have core facts, core evidence against an individual. So the moment investigation is done in such a manner that the prosecution does not have any concrete evidence that the court can believe in order to convict an individual, then that case is as good as lost. And so that's what the Supreme Court has succeeded in saying concerning the Code of Conduct Tribunal decision, affirming that decision.
But couldn't the prosecution also argue that, look, it did a very good job, it did a proper investigation, that it had enough evidence, but it's just that the Supreme Court judges did not just share the conviction that they did a good job, and that what they were presented with was not just a mere hearsay?
Well, that is the court that has the final say based upon the issue of evidence. If you are a prosecutor and you are a defense counsel, the court will look at the evidence presented by the prosecution and also look at whatever evidence you are offering in terms of defense of the case before reaching a decision. Now, if your evidence is not sufficient enough to convict an individual, of course, this issue of proving your reasonable doubt, then the decision will be reached in favor of an accused person. So whatever the defense is saying now, the court now tend to have believed the defense more than that of the prosecution. So the issue of hearsay was mentioned. I remember because I read a bit of the judgment this afternoon on my iPad, and I hear that the court was mentioning issue of hearsay, that much of the evidence that was used in conviction, in prosecuting the case, was on hearsay evidence, and there is no way any court that is serious in the land will convict an individual based on hearsay evidence. So the Supreme Court happens to be the final court in the land, unfortunately, for those who may be arguing anything to the contrary. That is the final court in the land, and whatever they have said is final. The only appeal again you have may be before God, and that may be after we have exited this age. The final decision now is that Bukola Saraki is innocent of the charges levied against him.
let's face it, this case has had political ramifications as well. We've seen this case, for instance, cause some problem in the ruling APC. So going forward, what do you expect to see? Because other than being a lawyer, you're also a political analyst.
I mean, you're talking about what will be the feelings within the APC circle?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That look, whether we like it or not, this case has had political ramifications. It's caused problems in the APC. So going forward now, what do you expect to see?
Well, I think some people that have this argument that this case in the first place was political. That if Saraki has not actually emerged as the Senate president, there wouldn't have been any charge of hiding his assets, or declaring assets that were not there in the first place against him. That why he was actually being charged was because of the fact that he disobeyed the directive of the political party and then became the president of the Senate, and so they were reading political meaning into the charge that was actually preferred against him. So they will now probably have the laugh, they will last laugh and say, look, we said it that it was all politics, and now the court now has come in to clear him of all the charges and all that. So I think now that the days ahead is going to be interesting with Saraki and his friends that want to actually exit from APC. Be interested in exiting now in the light of this judgment, or would they want to return or remain in the political party, which they came in 2015, actually helped in grabbing power from the PDP, their former political party. Will he remain and all that? So it's something that we present an interesting scenario in the weeks ahead. But some people are saying in the light of this judgment that Saraki now will now heave a sigh of relief and want to remain in APC. Some other persons say, look, these guys have made up their mind to actually join PDP, and then there will be a combination.
And let me just quickly ask you this. Let me just quickly ask you. What are you saying? What do you think? What are you saying? You've told me what some people may be saying, but what are you saying?
What I'm saying is that for Saraki as a person, I can't read his mind now. I don't know the extent of his involvement in the new realignment, politically.
But if you were talking to him, what would you tell him?
Well, if I am his political advisor, I want him to consider all the ramifications. I don't know what his ambition is, but what I've heard from the grapevine is that he wants to come back as a Senate president. I would rather want him, to consider his political interest first, because in politics, it's about interest. Every other thing is secondary, but he will want to consider his political interest. So if he wants to remain in APC, so he may be negotiating now for a retention as a Senate president. But I tell you, there are many Nigerians who may not want him to come back as a Senate president because they saw him as a cog in the wheel. Especially most of the reforms that APC wanted to carry under this administration, they saw the Senate and the House of Reps as being a cog in the wheel. But he has to actually put his interest first. And so whether the political party will accommodate him concerning his interest now will be something that will actually be a determinant factor as to whether he will retain himself in APC or will go to another political party. So it's about his interest now. That is what I think he will be considering at this point in time.
All right, Mr. Bani, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
It is my pleasure.
We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.